Our first presenter is Michele Streeter. She's the Associate Director of Policy and Advocacy, and she comes to us from the Institute for College Access and Success. We like to call it TICAS. But I do think that this is an organization that for some time now has been on the forefront of advocacy around the financial aid issues. And so we're excited to have Michele Streeter. Michele?
Thanks so much, Candace. As Candace said, I am a federal policy lead at the Institute for College Access and Success. Yes, we call it TICAS. We use T in our acronym, which is very strange, but it's better than ECAS, I guess. So here we are. We are based in Oakland, California and Washington, DC. We work on state policy and federal policy. As I said, I'm the federal policy lead on our affordability portfolio. I'm actually full-time remote from New Jersey, so closer to Philly than I am DC, but I'm kind of in our DC milieu. So happy to kind of be here to talk about the campaign for doubling the Pell Grant, a little bit of context and background on why we're calling for double Pell specifically, how the campaign came about, what's next for Pell in Congress and with the Biden administration, and then hopefully how you all can be involved. So to start, I'm sure this is well known among this group, but I always like to get some quick context in about Pell just to kind of level set and reiterate, what it is we're talking about and what a critical program it is, how much it already does, and how much more it could do if we invested at the right levels. So we know that Pell Grants are federal government's most popular and most effective investment in college affordability, which is a nice, unusual but nice combination in terms of our advocacy work. So this is kind of the core message we like to lead with. It's not only, there's a really strong research base that shows the effectiveness of Pell, of course, a ton of anecdotal evidence, and we'll talk a little bit more later about the importance of student voices here, but it's also really, really effective, and it has a lot of bipartisan support. Everyone loves the Pell Grant. There's, very few people you're going to run into who are not big fans of Pell. So we like to use that kind of as our baseline. And so as Congress and the Biden administration kind of look to address the college affordability crisis, as we now are, we can, I think, call it that. We look at doubling Pell as kind of the cornerstone to that, comprehensive federal approach. We have a fairly broad federal kind of advocacy portfolio around, debt-free college and financial aid and college accountability and all of these pieces, but we still look at Pell as kind of the cornerstone piece of all of this, because not only, as we said, there's a strong evidence base for its success, it's a program that already exists, it's well understood, it's well supported. So these are not things that we can overlook. These are really important pieces to kind of the pragmatic piece of our advocacy work, and saying this is, creating a new program from scratch in Congress is, a very heavy lift. And I'll talk a little bit more later about what we saw with the reconciliation bill and the Build Back Better bill. I'm sure folks have been following that as well. But you see, kind of creating a new program from scratch, while that is something we also advocate for in terms of, as I said, the debt-free college piece, that's a much heavier lift. There's no buy-in. It's not necessarily bipartisan. Pell is something that's been around for decades. Everyone loves it. So, if we're looking just totally pragmatically at how can we get more federal dollars into college affordability, Pell Grant program is a really good place to start. So by doubling Pell, we're asking for, we like to think of it as, it's both really practical, again, for all the reasons I just laid out, but it's also transformative given kind of the amount of money that we're asking for. So we look at it as, it's not only going to make college more affordable, that means, obviously it will significantly reduce student debt, that goes hand in hand, also boosting completion rates. And then we talk a lot about kind of driving economic mobility and economic growth, especially in kind of a COVID recovery context. So we like to center all these benefits, less debt, better outcomes, economic growth, that all of this will flow from making what are really basically just kind of long overdue investments that we should have been making all along. We should be at this kind of $13,000 maximum grant level that we're asking for. If every year we did this, if we kind of maintained it and kept up investment, we would be there. But unfortunately, Congress has kind of abdicated its responsibility here. And so we are, it sounds big to say double Pell, but we're really just pushing them to do what they should have been doing, all along, because Pell, now it covers less than a third of the average cost of attending a four-year public. At its peak, it covered 3/4 of that cost. So you see that's a huge decline in terms of purchasing power. So I also think, as I mentioned, it's really important, at least from, again, kind of a practical advocacy standpoint, to look at this within the broader approach to kind of the college affordability and the student debt question. So I work a lot also on the student debt side of the equation and on student loan repayment and the repayment system and all of that. But I think we also need to reframe the conversation and talk about solving the front end problem of affordability, rather than just saying, how do we address student debt? Really important part of our work to address student debt for those who've already taken it out. But I think it's equally important to talk about how do we get to the root cause of why students are being burdened with debt. So we see, again, Pell, like all roads are leading to Pell here. And it's, it's a really important kind of way to, when someone talks about student debt, when someone talks about completion rates, when, all of these issues have their own, solutions that, that exist alongside Pell. But again, that's why we talk about it as the kind of the cornerstone, the keystone, the pillar of kind of where all of this flows. So I'll talk a little bit about how we kind of arrived at the actual double amount and kind of why it's more than just a slogan. It's a great slogan. It's a great hashtag. It lends itself really well, which is helpful. But we actually arrived at it from a research base. So TICAS first called for basically putting the maximum grant. We first referred to it as putting it on a path to doubling. We put out a research report about 10 years ago now, which is a little bit discouraging that it takes this long, but we keep at it. But basically came out of an analysis of what level investment would be needed in the Pell program to overcome gaps based on students' income in both enrollment and completion. So we see these persistent gaps in a student's income level when they enter college, in whether they will complete their program. What can we do with Pell to close those gaps? So we basically made some estimates, and I'm happy to drop the link to this paper, but we saw that to close kind of the necessary, make these jumps in terms of the gap, we would need to basically get to double where we were in 2013. And that has not changed. It's actually, I think the research has shown we could even go further than double, but there's some great research that our partners at NCAN have done. I think you all are a member of NCAN, or many of you are. So they now talk about getting to 50% of purchasing power. So, the double Pell Grant right now would get you to about covering half of the average cost of a four-year public. So that's another kind of helpful way to talk about it. And again, pairing with other college affordability measures is certainly an important part of the conversation, but we like to keep coming back to, centering Pell and going back to that double message. So it certainly sounds good. We're not just, but we're not just saying it because it sounds catchy or looks good in a tweet. We're saying it. We know it's what will work. We know it's, as I said, overdue investments. That's a really helpful message, especially when talking to folks on the Hill, because a lot of people in Congress, they might agree with the message or the policy prescription, but they are concerned about cost implications, and especially hearing like, what is that going to cost to, double this program that already costs a lot of money? And so to talk about it as, this is something that should have been done all along. It's basically upkeep and maintenance, deferred maintenance for the program and for students. And again, depending on your audience, it's important to talk about it will pay off in so many ways. As we talk about any college affordability investment. It pays off not just for the individual student, but kind of for the economy and society as a whole. So I will briefly touch also kind of on the broader advocacy environment, if that's helpful, and kind of what that means for the Double Pell movement, and then I can walk through the Double Pell online tool really quickly. So basically, we are at a little bit of a crossroads. We're in, it's a big shift from where we were, a year ago, even 6 months ago. We have this administration in Congress that have kind of explicitly called for doubling Pell. President Biden called for double Pell on the campaign trail. There is a bipartisan bill that came out for the first time it's not bipartisan, a bicameral bill from the Senate and the House calling for double Pell. This is kind of the first time this has happened. So a few years ago, double Pell was kind of an extreme thing to say, and it didn't have a lot of support from kind of the leadership, the mainstream leadership, either in Congress or the White House, and now that has changed. So even if we're not actually getting anything across the finish line in terms of funding, the paradigm has shifted significantly in the past few years, which I think is a really important kind of to keep that drumbeat going. Because again, as we know, it can take decades to get these changes in place. But the fact that there is kind of this undercurrent of support from the highest levels of government is a really big, important change, and we want to capitalize on that. So there's kind of this weird combination of a huge, renewed investment in talking about college affordability, talking about student debt, and yet, we see in Congress, there's a lot of things have stalled, and kind of the big legislation for making investments in higher ed has, the Build Back Better Act, that's stalled. We don't know if it's going to move forward. That was, a big opportunity to get a lot of Pell funding. So we're still hoping that moves forward and still doing advocacy around that. But we're also trying to think about where can we pivot, and where can we turn, and what's our next vehicle that we might be able to get Pell dollars in. Because I think it's important for us both to be really specific about when there is an opportunity to seize it and get what we can, while also keeping up kind of that steady message of, we will applaud any amount of new dollars in Pell, but at the same time, we still want to talk about DoublePell. We still want to talk about the transformative power of that. And so we are simultaneously saying, we have an appropriations process coming up for the, the next fiscal year. We will be doing a lot of efforts around, getting as many dollars in the appropriations process as we can, while at the same time, continuing to say, great, you want to put $400 in Pell, every dollar in Pell we're going to applaud, but we still need to see double, and here's why. So that is kind of our broader messaging. And I will pause here. I see there's maybe a couple questions in the chat. If people want to kind of start opening Q&A, and then I can kind of walk through the DoublePell website with some of the action tools, if that sounds good.
Yes, that sounds good, Michelle. I did put in the chat, please. You guys know, most of you who aren't new, but if you are new to our group, please, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. Sometimes we have a small enough group to open it up by audio, but I'm going to say not seeing anything pressing right now. Michelle, go ahead and share.
Sure. All right, let me share my screen.
There is one question here from Michelle Johnson on how can we support the DoublePell campaign. I think you're getting ready to get into that, actually.
Yes, that's great.
Which is why, yeah, I avoided that one.
So I don't know if folks have had a chance to take a look at this site. So this is kind of the landing page for the DoublePell campaign. You'll see is my screen showing up okay, by the way? Looks good. Okay. So I'll just walk through quickly. It's a really, easy kind of intuitive site, so everyone can kind of poke through at their own pace. But essentially, we have kind of this landing page. We have resources. We have a take action opportunity. And so I will just click through to show the take action piece. So as I said, we are always looking for specific vehicles in Congress that are moving forward and opportunities to say, this bill is moving, it has Pell money in it, we need to kind of have a very specific call to action there. While at the same time, we also just want to keep the drumbeat going, even when there's not necessarily something moving right away, because given what's happening in Washington, anything can move at any moment. And so it's important to kind of have that baseline at all times. So you can kind of go through and you all and your constituents and other groups you work with, there's different kind of tools that we've put together here. So there's a Contact Congress page, which I'm sure you see this all across the internet on different causes that you care about. But it essentially just kind of has this preloaded message. You put in your information, your zip code, it will automatically send it to those in your district. So this is a really good tool to send out to those you work with. And it's just kind of an easy way for folks to get involved. You can put it on social media. We have kind of a social toolkit, there's graphics, there's various things that trying to make it as easy as possible for people to get involved at whatever level they have capacity for. We also have this kind of basic fact sheet. Again, you can kind of pull from this and, feel free to copy and paste and take whatever from it. Again, make your own social tiles, put things on your website. If you're talking to members of Congress or in your state, you can kind of just pull whatever is helpful. There's also, excuse me, some great state by state information that we have. And I think, we don't have it all listed out on here because that would get very unwieldy, but also happy to kind of, you can contact the me or the other organizers of the campaign, and we can kind of pull things as they are helpful in specific contexts. So that's kind of the advocacy toolkit. We also have the resources page, which just, again, if you it's a repository of, if you need to there's FAQs, there's polling that shows kind of the general support for Pell. So, it's kind of a mix and match as to what is helpful and kind of what capacity level your organization might have to get involved. You can kind of hopefully quickly pull through things and share out links or share out resources there. We also have the, where are our students? Pell Voices, which is my favorite part of the website. We have a lot of kind of a repository of student voices talking about what Pell has meant to them, what doubling Pell would mean to them, and we are trying to get as many student voices on here as possible. So you'll see if you kind of scroll through, we have a lot of folks already. We love to see them, and we have a Tell Us Your Story feature, so you can kind of share this out with students you work with as well. We try to make it as low lift and easy as possible, knowing that students have a lot on their plates already. We don't need to, as we advocate for them, we don't need to make them do the work for us. So hopefully just something quick and easy. And then there's, you kind of consent to having the story shared. So this is another really helpful tool. And we hope to kind of bring in a lot more grassroots and student voices. We already have a really strong network of students, especially the University of California system and the student public interest research groups both have really strong grassroots networks around DoublePell already. So we draw a lot on their voices, but we are hoping to continue to ramp up our student work as well. Again, because these are the folks that we're working for, and we want to center their voices, and that's kind of the most effective way to get this point across. So there's definitely different ways, through this site and this tool that you can do. Again, there's kind of various levels of involvement. There's just doing the action page, there's bringing student voices in, there's lots of resources, social media toolkit, and then there will be, I think, a lot of opportunities this year moving forward for more involvement from folks. So we are hoping to plan it's actually the 50th anniversary of Pell this year, so we're hoping to plan a 50th anniversary celebration in DC and do kind of a Hill event and bring students in and do a panel and things like that. So that's our, that will be ramping up, and hopefully, that will be a chance for others to get involved as well. And then, additionally, kind of, as I said, whenever we see something in Congress that we're able to jump on, we're working on something around the appropriations process. If Build Back Better starts moving forward again, there's always kind of letters that we're doing, different sign-on opportunities. Again, we try to make it as easy as possible, given you all have probably more than full-time jobs work at your actual job. And so we like to make it as easy as possible for folks to just kind of hit a button, send something out, and then we can kind of do the work from there.